Awesome. Now let's move on to Nadia.
Yeah, my name is Nadia. I just recently graduated from SFU and I studied communications during my time there. I'm now based in Toronto, Ontario, and I work as a UX UI designer for a software company called Workforce Software. And I'm also one of the admins for Design Buddies, hence why Grace and we have matching backgrounds. So other than design, I also like to just explore the city I'm in and then attending concerts. So hopefully that's coming back post COVID. So yeah, hand it off back to Eric.
Last and but not the least, Ryan. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Ryan. I'm a product designer, work for Curative. It's a healthcare company. Currently, we are focused on COVID-19 testing and vaccine in United States. So on the side, I'm also mentor on ATP list. Yeah, I like to watch Twitch stream a lot. So it's really cool that I'm on a Twitch stream right now. So yeah, thank you for having me here.
Yeah. That's awesome. Like we love have everyone. Sorry, every one of you have here. It's amazing how you guys have like such diverse backgrounds. Now we'll go get into more of it and get into the next question, which is how did you break into UX? I understand there are many ways that you can break into UX. Before, like a couple generations back, how it was, and now how it is now. So I'd like to go ask that question for each one of you. Starting from Grace again.
Yeah, of course. I never studied UX in school. I actually majored in undergrad bioengineering and computer science and engineering. So UX was never part of my academic career, and I was mostly self-taught. But as a brief background, growing up, I was born and raised in the SF Bay area, so down in California. And I never thought I would ever work in tech. Like I feel like because I was surrounded by tech, I always felt the pressure to go like doctor, engineer, lawyer. But I actually want to be an anime artist and a game designer. And I played a lot of games, drew a lot of anime. I was always that kid who just drew in class and never really paid attention, but I love storytelling, which kind of pivoted my interest to UX. And I just love making imaginary characters and bring them to life and making people laugh. I just never cared about math and science. When I was growing up in school, in fact, my parents had to bribe me to actually try in class. And in fact, they would bribe me by buying me Nintendo DS and Wii games. So I got further inspired in games. And so I was that kid. And then in high school, long story short, why I studied bioengineering is because I was an avid cross-country and track runner, and I wanted to learn how to biohack myself to run faster. And that is why I studied bioengineering. So I know the ins and outs of the human body, so I can optimize myself. And yeah, I also loved AP Bio. I love the story cells tell. I loved anime. I love biology because I just thought photosynthesis is so cool. So I decided to major in bioengineering. Bioengineering only because my parents were like, yeah, engineering sounds more prestigious. So I can major in that. I was like, okay, prestigious, fancy, titles. Silicon Valley. And that is literally why I studied bioengineering. It's only because I was interested in biology and art, but I felt the pressure to study something that society told me that was successful or prestigious or whatever. And then after a few years, it's doing pre-med bioengineering, I was like, when I came to college, I was like, I'm gonna be a doctor engineer. I will be a doctor, neurosurgeon, Olympic runner, whatever. And then after doing a few internships in bioengineering, I realized my favorite part of it was taking photos of the cells and overlaying them in Photoshop and making them look nice, not the actual artwork. So I decided to pivot. I actually during that time a VR lab opened up my school. So this was around 2018, and decided to go into game design and game development in the VR space. And I realized that there's lots of tutorials online, and I'm not limited by my major, and I could just use these tutorials to learn how to do game design development. So I got some internships in that. Later picked up studying computer science. And then when I graduated in 2019, I thought I wanted to be a software engineer or a game developer. But then I realized after 3 internships, I didn't like the code at all. And that was completely okay. But because I thought growing up in Silicon Valley, it's oh, you got to code. That's prestigious, fancy, right? But I didn't enjoy it at all. And that is totally okay. And then I decided to pivot into I was having a hard time kind of finding jobs or internships, entry level roles in VR specifically. So I then went on the interwebs and kind of discovered Facebook groups in design. And I discovered like UX and product design. I was like, this is really cool. So I started just like reading a bunch of articles about it, talking to people, attending workshops, doing a lot of hackathons like this and protothons. And later just learning fundamentals and then doing a lot of projects, doing a lot of hackathons, volunteer work, and working up my way into building a portfolio through these kind of events. And then later getting my first ever UX internship at Electronic Arts in 2020, June of 2020. And I did the summer and fall internship and started full-time in December of 2020. So that's kind of how I got into UX. It's just a series of just like that early childhood interest of storytelling and just like character design. And then later pivoting into UX and product design that way too. And just like utilizing the resources online and learning about UX, and now I'm here.
Wow, Grace, that sounds like a roller coaster. I don't even know.
It does.
Went from like biohacking yourself, biomedical engineering to
yeah, I just really like solving problems and storytelling, and like I feel like engineering is like solving problems, manga, not listening in class, like storytelling, and now like UX, solving problems with stories, I guess, with user journeys.
That's awesome. I hope so yeah, it's never too late to get into UX, I guess, even if you change your major like 3 to 4, 6 times. I think that's very common among most UX designers, I myself included. But yeah, let's move on let's move on to David now on that aspect.
Sure. Wow, that was a roller coaster. Looking at everybody's face, I think it's safe to say I had the longest career so far in UX, but I haven't done nearly as much as Grace. That's awesome. I actually came into it from an art background. I was a graphic designer and web designer. And in doing web design, this is in the early days of the web, I suppose, there was a lot of bad web design. And people would get frustrated with websites, and I was certainly one of them. I have a low tolerance for that sort of thing. So I think that's what started the gradual shift towards kind of initially usability, and then just becoming a full-blown UX designer probably about 10 years ago. When I started at Central, I was a hybrid designer developer. I was very happy to leave development behind because I knew I wasn't as good as everybody that I worked with who was dedicated to it. Never learned JavaScript, didn't really want to. And it hasn't hurt me too much. Occasionally I feel inferior, but that's okay. So yeah, UX was a good fit for me. And then because I've had such a large part of my career at Central One, having worked there 13 years, it's kind of my UX experience is really tied into this one organization and just how we've done things and how we've transitioned over the years, and how I've, as I get a little more senior, I'm able to kind of guide those transitions and really not only improve our products, but improve our team and methods. So yeah, that's kind of my story. Initially graphic design, then some development for quite a few years, and then strictly UX.
Mm-hmm. It's very amazing how like you're giving us a perspective from like 10 to 13 years ago, and back then UX UI was definitely not as structured the way it is right now, or it had some sort of structure, which is very interesting because like, yeah, we don't get to see that perspective. What we see right now is what it is, but we have to also acknowledge that it grew to be, it was a long journey. It was already existing 10, 20 years back. Now it has like grew to what it is right now. And back then it was probably like bad websites. You probably mean some of those weird pixelated art and typography that looks very bulky and fiery.
There were so many different ways to be bad back then. I mean, I was sort of naive and thought, okay, now we're understanding usability. We can read Jacob Nielsen's books and we can do these things and everyone will get it. And the web will be so much better and there won't be any more bad websites. But that didn't happen. There are still bad websites. They're bad in different ways. So we have to constantly kind of learn more and learn how to improve new things that are coming along,
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, now let's move on to Nadia.
Yeah, for sure. Just an FYI, there's like a thunderstorm where I am right now. So if you hear anything in the background, that is what is going on. Like I saw two flashes outside my window, but just an FYI. But
Toronto
yeah,
weather for you.
how I broke into UX was I did freelance graphic design and social media throughout my undergrad. And as I mentioned, I studied communication. So I transitioned to more of like marketing and communications throughout like my later years in undergrad. I did two co-ops and internships in marketing communications, and by the second one, that occurred during when COVID like first hit in like March of 2020, and then um, you guys I probably know that like a lot of like businesses like around the world did like layoffs, and I did some self reflection by the time we all were forced to work from home. And I just thought to myself, like, maybe marketing and like communications is just like not for me anymore. So when I flew back to Vancouver, I was doing a co op at the time in Toronto. And when I flew back to Vancouver to finish up more school online, then I made like a goal for myself to like get into like UX and like just to really learn about like the fundamentals of it. So that was when I reached out to Grace at the time. She was starting up Design Buddies when it only had like 1,000 members, and I originally asked her if you guys were looking to like have someone to like make a website, and eventually I like just joined on to become like one of like the first like admins to this day. And it's been like a really good journey just like being part of like Design Buddies, and also just like being in like the greater UX community. So to get back into like how I continue to break into design, I cold emailed who would then be like the company that I was working for. We were originally a startup, and I cold emailed actually like our director of HR and our two co-founders, and just to like get to know more about them, and then if they were open to any of like UX opportunities. And we had like a chat, like an initial chat, and they were impressed with like what I had to like maybe potentially bring. So they got back to me and they wanted to give me like a full-time offer. So that was how I got like my first like start in the design industry. And yeah, looking back at it, like now that it's almost like September, then it's been a really good journey, because I found that like you don't have to come from like a design or art background to like necessarily get into UX, and everyone is just really like supportive. Everyone has like different perspectives, knowledge as to like how can we gather like come together to like solve like this common issue or problem. And yeah, it's just like honestly only the start of my career.
Wow, yes, it's amazing how you're coming from a marketing background. I do hear a lot of people coming in from communications major and switching from marketing to UX UI, but your even among them, I think your background story is very very unique itself.
Yeah,
This
thank
is so
you.
yeah, moving on to Ryan.
Yeah. I think I'm the only one here that came from a more traditional background. Like I studied interaction design during university. So the reason why I did that was I was really into technology, and I was super into like hack my stuff, like interface on my computer or on my phone to make them look and function exactly how I want them to be. And I figured out that UX UI or interaction design is really close to what I like to do. Basically, design a user experience and interface that um, makes me feel good. So yeah, and I studied interaction design at Amicar. So it was like I really enjoy living in British Columbia, and it all just worked out for me. Um, and after school, I did my first job was marketing designer. But I quickly realized that wasn't really my thing. So I spent another 6 months trying to find a product designer job it wasn't that easy as I thought when I was in school, because this industry was so popular at that time. Like I thought I would be just get job right after university, but that wasn't the case. Yeah, so yeah, I just got more into the product designer, and right now I'm trying to move towards more design system designer, like because I really like doing CSS. That also fits my interest of hacking things to make them look exactly how I want.
Well, you say you're coming in from a traditional standpoint. I still think yours is unique in its own way. It's a little bit divergent. A little bit about my background. Like I think mine's the most traditional. Like is it like go to a college or university, get that specific degree. So what I'm studying is SIAD, School of Interactive Arts and Technology at SFU, Simon Fraser University. And now after that, just graduate and get land up a product designer, just a designer role. That's simple as that. Most people do have backgrounds like such as yours and everybody else here. And so also a lot of boot camps, a lot of design boot camps, a lot of just portfolio creation and just getting your hands dirty that way. Yeah. Before moving on to our second question, I do see everybody. So I see on our Slido, we have some questions here and there. Just an FYI, we will have everybody answer these questions at the very end of the panel after we exhaust all the questions that I have for our panelists first. So our next question is, what made you guys stick with UX design in general? I guess you already touched upon it a little bit in your intro, like how did you break into it? But yeah, I would like you guys to dig a little bit more deep into it, starting with Grace, of course.
Yeah, like I feel like overall, when I was starting out in UX, it felt really scary, like intimidating. And I felt like a lot of design communities that I was particularly in at that time, like end of 2019, the ones I was specifically in felt elitist. And maybe let me know in the chat if y'all can relate as well. And yeah, I was really interested in like product design and UX design because it was like it integrated so many of like my various backgrounds together in like this very interesting field, but I had trouble like connecting with people because I felt judged for not having a design degree or not like being in a boot camp, just like this random new grad trying to like I don't know learn my way into design and networking and stuff. And yeah, so I joined a bunch of like communities online, asked some questions, but later would kind of like negatively judge for asking questions. Like sometimes like when you ask the questions, it can like reveal what you don't know. So like that was what I felt out of like every question I asked in these communities. And I had like no connections in UX. In fact, I had a lot of professors telling me that like, oh, you shouldn't do design. You're an engineer. You're like wasting your whole degree, blah, blah, blah. Stay in your lane and stuff. So there was like me with no mentors at school because there's no design program at Santa Clara University. And I was like, okay, turns to the internet. But then internet was like, okay, scary people. And I was like, okay, this is very scary. So I might as well like I feel like always the best way to complain is to make things. So I made design buddies. Um, and I was just like, okay, I like design. It's really cool, but like the communities I was in didn't feel very wholesome. And I like being wholesome and inclusive. And so I just made design buddies and just focused on creating a community where anybody can ask questions without feeling judged, learn design, share design, support each other, and just be wholesome. And then, yeah, and then it kind of grew. And then I realized a lot of people felt the same as me, like feeling like other communities were like scary, elitist, and we ended up just like connecting. And I guess like, and also during COVID, I think those factors led to Design Buddies growth. Now we're almost 27,000 members about like 16 months later. So it's been really fun. And what kept me kind of going is just like realizing there's always going to be like nice people out there. There's going to be mean people everywhere, no matter like what field you're in as well. But you don't have to like give permission to let those people feel like make you feel inferior or anything. I just focus like as a human, it's kind of easy to like focus on like the few trolls or whatever. But most of the people in this world that I realized, especially in UX, they're like really nice because like empathy is a key skill to succeed in UX. You really have to understand a user, and so usually people I talk to in UX are really supportive, and I don't know, I just like really vibe with the design community, like on Discord, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and Instagram. And that's kind of what kept me going. And I feel like there's always really interesting problems to solve at work. And I work on a lot of like player experience, enterprise products, and marketing products as well. And I have a really supportive director and manager who really cares about like my career growth and stuff, on top of like helping me match career goals to like business outcomes and stuff like that too. And like the general like Brita UX community and like my team at EA is the kind of two things keeping me going, and also the interesting problems to solve. It's just really fun. And I just find it fun. Like that's I guess that's the main reason why. Thank you.
Wow. That was I don't know. There were a lot of points that was touched upon. Like we also heard about the origin of design buddies. That's awesome. Like it's interesting how you just started like a very simple text reaching out to people in the community, and hence design, but like created the community design buddies, and like 16 months later you guys are the biggest, fastest growing design community online in the world almost. That's amazing. And like, and I really, what do you say, I really empathize with you on that point where you really like to be in a design community and with other designers. There's always good people out there. And the point where you mentioned that designers are empathetic in nature, hence they are nicer or something. Really get to gel along with them really well. Now that you say that, mention that, yes, I do agree with that.
Yeah, like, and then really quickly, when I was in my CS class, everyone was like really intimidated. They're like, "What are you getting on the test?" Like, "Oh, look at me compiling this code. Like, I'm so fancy, reaching this tool." And then UX is like none of that. But CS, I definitely felt a lot of that.
Totally. Yes. I also started off with computer science. Yeah, people were there similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's move on to David. Like, what made you stick with UX?
Yeah, well, first let me say, great job on Design Buddies, you guys. That was so awesome. I would say I mentioned earlier, kind of getting an initial interest in UX because of finding poorly designed websites frustrating, and then once you start applying what you've learned, you see that you can actually make a difference and really improve software and websites, and potentially improve people's lives. So that's pretty powerful. So I think that was one of the things that really kept me interested. And the other aspect, having come from more of a graphic design background, I found with just general design, visual design, it was more of a challenge to kind of defend your work, right? Because a lot of it is your opinion and your taste, whereas I found UX to be a bit more scientific. It's based on, you've done your early stage research, and then you've tested usability testing. So it's easier to go into a group of stakeholders and defend the work and say, this is why we made these choices, right? So that certainly appealed to me. It just felt like you were on a more solid base with your work.
Yeah. Sorry, but yeah, that's very, very awesome with the graphical design background. Like I do see, like there's a saying that a mentor of mine mentioned a long time ago, is if you're looking for something beautiful, you go to an artist. If you're looking to have functionality, you go to an engineer. But if you're looking for something that designed well, a functionality that looks aesthetic good and solves a problem, you go to a designer. And that's what I'm seeing from your background, David, like how you start off as a graphic designer and really wanted more functionality and tried to back up your designs. And then eventually you created UX. You were one of the founders for as the term designer since back then. That's crazy.
Just because the beard is gray doesn't mean I'm one of the founders of design, but
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. I have been around it for a long time.
It was very natural for you to get into it. That's amazing at the time. It's just
it was, and like Grace, I don't have a formal education in it. It was, the field was younger then, and so was I. So it wasn't really a requirement. it would have been hard to find a course probably at a lot of schools. So it was just something I grew into gradually, and went to conferences, had email exchanges with lots of people who know more than I did, read a lot of books, and just putting things into practice and seeing what works, and learning more about research. That's been the biggest part, I suppose. We're always frustrated that we're never able to do enough research, because scope of projects always, that's the thing that gets compressed, but we push for it because it's important and we can demonstrate the benefits, you know.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. UX research is also definitely a thing. And even as designers, we're also ever learning. It's great. So let's move on to Nadia.
Yeah, so what made me stay in UX is mostly the mentorship and support. So I feel like I kind of like struck gold or the lottery when I got my first UX job. Because my manager that I work with, we work really closely together and doing mock-ups or depending our design decisions with like the developers. And honestly, like just coming from like a working class background where I was given like limited resources, or I had to like maybe work like twice as harder as the average student in order to like work towards my goals and stuff. Mentorship and support is really important to me, and that was what made me stay in UX. Especially as I mentioned, like because this is a field where you don't have to go to like art or design school, especially when you're being like self-taught, as much as it's you have like the whole internet in front of you when it comes to like learning about UX. Sometimes you do need that guidance. So that is one thing that made me stay in UX. And also secondly, just the number of people that I've connected with like over the past year online, living in like different parts of the world, or what like the type of like industry that they're in within UX. It made me like open my doors as to like how is UX being how is UX being seen in like, let's just say like the fintech industry to more like unconventional industries such as I'm just trying to like, I think like fintech, for example, like just really fascinates me as to like how does like UX solve like problems in like finances or money, or even like gaming, which is like really interesting because I initially thought that like when it comes to like gaming that you would design like just like the video game, but I do realize that user experience is really important into like how to like choose a character, or how to like chat with other users. So those are the two things that I believe like what has made me stay in UX so far.
That's also another very inspiring reason to stay with UX. Honestly, like it's a little bit of things. What you have touched on like reminds me of the book Design of Everyday Things. Like touch on like how every little decision, every little thing that you see in the world, there's just some sort of design and idea behind it. The way it is because of a reason, not just for aesthetic reasons. Yeah, it's amazing.
Thank you.
Let's move on to Ryan.
Yeah, for me, I think what made me stay is pretty much the same thing as what made me get in UX. I really like to create elegant, simple user interface, but also bring a really usable user experience. So I think that's a part makes me feel really fulfilling when you know that your user enjoy using your software and it help them to solve their problem. Yeah, I think that's the biggest reason why I stay here.
Big problem solver, yes. So critical thinking, always trying to solve a problem. And I really relate to you that way because I think I also think that I'm the same with the design thinking. I really want to solve problems, not just create beautiful things. Yes. Okay, we could move on to our next question. So you guys can take your time with this one. So the next question is, if you can share a cool story or some experience you had with UX that you would like to share with everybody. You guys can, I would normally have this in order, but I think I'll give you guys some time. Whoever wants to go first can go on this one. Could be like a specific experience or some UX you encountered with some other people or during testing.
I can start and might get the conversation going. One real validation of the power of research for me was quite a long time ago. We were working on in our website an app. There's a tool for finding a branch for a credit union, and very often when you work in UX, you're kind of told from somewhere above somebody mysterious what needs to be done. We need to redesign this find branch tool. So UX designers are always supposed to question things. So we went out and did some research, and what we found initially was that nobody uses it. They use Google, and it's kind of obvious, right? But it was such a surprise to the organization and the people who were pushing us to redesign this feature that, well, all we have to do is optimize it for Google, not redesign it or rethink it in any way, because they're not using it. They're not going to, right? So I mean, you can still, we ended up doing work on it so that it was a better experience once they came from Google, but they weren't going directly into it. So that was an eye opener, and just tells you always need to do the research and you need to question every assumption.
Yeah, right. I see that a lot as well. I think like you found it definitely in the earlier years, but integration between softwares and platforms like these are becoming more and more common. And instead of optimizing certain features on our own platform, we're optimizing our features for using other features from on their platform. It was quite interesting now how everybody is connecting technology and like weaving it together all in its own way.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. It's very exciting to see. Yes. Anyone else wants to go next?
I guess I could go next. I kind of have like a lot of random experiences in UX, but I guess UX specifically, I feel like design buddies was really interesting because I randomly, I basically, yeah, we apply the UX process to design buddies. We do a lot of user research through surveys, interviews, as well as market research. I'm in over 100 communities as a lurker when I feel like lurking. And it all started just like really randomly. It was just like a messenger chat at first and then a Discord, and I think from that, I guess like applying the UX process to design buddies is like for the messenger chat, I looked at what kind of topics people were talking about, and later section made them up the channels and design buddies, and later we did some card sorting to organize our channels. So I guess the example is like applying UX to like UXing and designing a community with UX, and a series of like user research and market research to find like what pain points people face, what worked out in other communities, what do other communities have. So we have like familiar things in design buddies as well, and just always like not being afraid to like mess up or not being afraid to like launch something that no one uses. So it's a series of just like knowing what pain points people use and like driving different solutions and testing them out and not being able to like iterate or scrap them doesn't work out. And so I feel like I think of like how do we measure success, or like how do we like keep improving. So like I feel like that mindset UX and just like applying that to like a lot of different projects, even if like you and the audience are thinking of doing like a startup or something, and just like applying that process of just like learning, iterating, like learning, building, iterating, and keep improving. It's like this common pattern I see a lot, and like startups especially, and also just like your whole life. And let's just say you're like trying a new approach to learning UX, and you see someone attended a boot camp, but then you also want to self-teach or like try out different ways to learn UX. So you can also apply that to yourself as well. And I feel like UX is like a mindset or like way of life, I guess. I don't want to go that far. I guess another really interesting experience is I can talk a little bit about networking because I actually got my internship without applying. It was 100% through networking. I recently reached out to my director on LinkedIn. I was like, I was like, I can talk more about networking. Maybe that could be like for a future question, but basically, I just asked my director, like, how did you get into UX? And then later landed an internship from that. Yeah, like I feel like the overall takeaway from networking is that like if you ask for a job, you get advice. If you ask for advice, you get a job. And I kind of applied it to my networking calls and got a job in UX. That was like my first job in UX. I didn't apply. So I thought that was a really cool experience. We're going with that direction.
That is very cool. I envy you a little bit. That's very good advice. A lot of good advice every like throughout that conversation, especially the one. If you look for a job, you get advice. If you look for advice, you get a
If
job.
you ask for a job,
If you sorry,
yeah.
yeah. So yeah, keep asking for advice, guys. You
Yeah.
might never know.
Exactly. Growth
And
mindset. People like
mhm,
that. Hiring managers love that.
yeah, especially the part about like applying your design thinking in the process into creating a design community. Oh my god, yeah, like creating a community is one of the hardest things to do. I'm like trying to grow a community on my own, and applying that design mindset on it and treating it like a actual product that's using entrepreneur and design thinking, it's crazy. Definitely something very cool. Who's next?
Yeah, I can go next. Maybe not as like as appealing as like doing like UX like work, but I guess a recent memory that I can recall is so my workplace originally it was based out of Ottawa because that was where it was like that was where our company was founded and like that's where most of my coworkers are based out of. But because of COVID, that now that everyone is working remotely and they have no plans on like opening the office. So we thought that it was earlier this summer that it's been like a year since we all met in person and a lot of like people have like joined our company since then. So we all decided on meeting up in person and me and another coworker that are both based in Toronto, we did like a road trip to Ottawa and that was like the first time I ever like met my manager and it was like a surreal experience because all this time I've been like seeing him like on a computer screen along with like his wife and like just meeting like each other like in person. Now they're like, oh, like you're not like you're finding like a real like person like behind the computer screen. And it was like surreal because like all this time like this is like my manager who like gives me like advice, helps me with design critiques, and just all that. He's even joined Design Buddies as well because he also believes in giving back to the community and just wanting to pay it forward. So like things like that have given me like the most impact and it's something that I just bring throughout life. So not necessarily technical, more of like just like a heartwarming story.
Oh yeah, totally. I think most of us would feel very close to your experience actually, because like for example, I also just started my career in design during COVID, and I haven't met most of the people that I worked with for over a year. Only this year was when we actually met. Oh my God, there's an actual real person behind the screen. and, and then finally we get that connection. Feel like there was always missing some sort of connection while we're working together, but then when you meet in person, that's when it gets completed. So yeah, definitely understandable.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, finally, Ryan.
Yeah. Yeah, I also had that feeling when I was meet my current like remote worker at an on-site trip. Like it was super. Like my manager, it feels like she was kind of short on video, but she was actually really tall in person. So that was really a surprise moment for me. But yeah, the thing I want to say about UX is it got me more interested in human psychology because you understand how user thinks. So like there are things like confirmation bias, like people tend to favor things that support their previous beliefs, and things like people prefer things that trigger their emotion rather than providing logic effects. So yeah, it got me into, it helped me understand myself better, like how I think when I look at certain news online or when I'm facing certain things. It really kind of helped me get into more of my personal mental health, understand how I think, how I work. Yeah, so that's all started with learning UX and understanding users.
Yes, like I would like to echo on that because people do think about functionality, UX design just looking something pretty, but yeah, the psychological aspect. There's probably a lot of some psych majors as well. We see a lot of designers coming out of students who come out of psychology, which is very, very cool. Design can be very emotional and like psychological as well. Certain colors like affect certain emotions and certain feelings, and certain clicks and animations do trigger some good feel good points about feelings as well. I completely understand that. And the part about like understanding, getting better to know about yourself with that psychology, that's very, very interesting. Never really thought about that actuality. Yeah, all very, very cool stories here. Thanks for sharing, guys. Okay, now I have a question which talks about where do you see the world of UX or even tech in general in the future? Like especially with COVID and all that, things are changing very fast. And within the COVID period, we did see a huge, huge increment and importance of UX design. So, what do you guys think is going to be the next big thing, or how future is going to look with UX and all? This time I'll go in order. So I'll have Grace first.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of things going on, like especially like VR and AR, and how do we create that like in-person connection without being in person? Because I realized in the beginning of the pandemic, people were like, "Whoa, work from home, so scared. Wow, what am I gonna do?" And now we're like, I don't we're now, and people are like craving to go back to office, and now people are like not wanting to go back to office. And I think that's super interesting how things kind of shifted because people tend to like adapt and stuff, and it's been pretty cool. Like I watch a lot of like tech news. Like there's this podcast I really like called Robin Hood Snacks. Highly recommend it to anyone just like curious about like investing or like tech in general. But I see a lot of promising future in like VR, AR, and how do we create that like in-person presence without actually being in person. Like will we meet, like will we be in like holograms and meet each other in like holograms and VR? Do we not have legs? Yeah, so I feel like there's a lot of applications like beyond web design and app design with UX. There's I feel like maybe in the future, maybe this is still happening right now actually, like 3D UX roles, designing like VR experiences, kind of going beyond the second dimension in UX is kind of where I see UX heading. And so I've been trying to like brush up my 3D skills because I feel like that's kind of where the future is headed as well. And also with the rise of like AI, machine learning, designing for data, designing for AI is also huge, and looking at tech kind of taking over. And also designing for like crypto, I feel like a lot of countries are like adapting Bitcoin. And yeah, having that as like maybe normalized in the future as well, having like Amazon and like Tesla accepting Bitcoin as a form of payment. And yeah, so to sum it up, a lot of like VR, AR, in that sense, a lot of like designing for data, machine learning, and making sure it's ethical and everything as well and accessible. And also crypto coming up as a new form of normal currency is what I personally think.
Right. No, totally. Like these are very, very cool things that we see the tech do moving forward. A lot of controversies associated with each one of them. Like AR and VR, I was recently notified that they're combining it and they're calling it XR, so like mixed
Yeah, it's
reality.
like extended reality or something.
Yeah, something like that. Actually, Nick here, Nick, are you present? Maybe you can talk more about XR.
Talk a bit about XR. I'll just hop in. I guess I'll just introduce myself. I've been running the whole stream, and for me, I'm most interested in game design work. and I've been working a lot with XR recently towards the end of my projects, as I'm also an IET student. So what I find most interesting is about XR is that it's not just applicable to games, but you can create different kinds of work or interactions through it, and it's such a new space that there's no real like established design ethos for it. So with as you experiment further, like using Unreal Engine or Unity to create different kinds of things, I'm really excited to see where that design extends to in the future. Like, how do you utilize the 3D space to integrate into different interfaces, or how do you change from a flat 2D to 3D, right? It's different kind of application versus normalized in a phone screen. So it's what I think about is from responsive to reality. But that's just a quick thing about what my personal thoughts are about XR.
Very, very cool. So can't wait, XR, VR, as fellow weebs, we do probably know all the game and isekai
Hatsune
anime.
Miku concerts, the holographic.
I can't wait. Living in that real. Yes, it's amazing. Yeah, so you guys heard it here first. UI design and UI, UX and UI in VR and XR, and it's gonna be crazy. Really excited for that. Okay, let's move on to David. That excitement.
Sure. I'm going to leave it to your generation to tell me about what's coming next, but I just do want to say that, like both Grace and Nick suggested, things change very quickly, and when you're working in an organization, I think it's easy for people think they understand what UX is, and they kind of pigeonhole you. So there was a project where we were creating web banking for Alexa, and the team seemed to be resisting having anything to do with UX. They said, "There's no UX in this," and I was like, "It's called a conversational UX. I think there's a UX. I'm pretty sure there are users and there's an experience, right?" And I think it's important for us to make sure we're inserting ourselves in all of these new things that are coming along, because there always will be users and there's an experience for them. And our job may evolve, but we're always going to play a key role.
That yes, it's very interesting how you did mention it's Alexa, it doesn't have any UX associated with it, but there's definitely something important there. I think UX does affect everything. It can be applied to almost anything. In fact, I feel one of my mentors from before, a year ago, she was actually working on a startup that was basically like Alexa integrated, and it was talk about medical health and provide medical help with that Alexa feature. So just have that in your living room or anything, and just in the case where certain things happen, or the way you talk, or the emotion it feels and understands. So there's a lot of machine learning going on in there, combined with user experience, to provide the most efficient and easiest way to provide that mental health care or just medical help, which is very, very cool in its own way. And I feel like that's definitely an undeveloped and not discovered that much part about UX there. That's another field, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan was talking about just the importance of psychology in our work, and as systems have behavioral and emotional recognition, it becomes really important, because suddenly your device is kind of understanding what you're feeling. That's a very different kind of user experience, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. It's funny, probably before phones were who knew this was gonna be what, fully touched. Before it was QWERTY keypad that had its own UX, and before that maybe Apple kind of revolutionized its own UX with, what was it called, iPods. Yeah, that had its own UX. Very interesting how it has developed. And definitely, we don't know what's going to come up next. Okay, let's move on to Nadia.
Yeah, thinking of like an educational perspective, I think in the future, as more and more universities and colleges, they might catch on with UX and maybe even like offer like a bachelor's of like user experience design. I do know like there are some existing universities that do offer like interaction design as a degree, but I guess it's like as the landscape keeps evolving and changing, then they're gonna have to like catch up and eventually maybe like offer like a bachelor's degree program. I know that like SFU that for CAT, they offer like a few courses in UX, but I guess like it'll only be a matter of time before like maybe due to like popularity and like just the job market, maybe it'll eventually be offered as like its own bachelor's. That's what I think with the world of UX in the future, and as well just the softwares and tools that we learn right now. Because I remember back in 2017 when I took like I at 102 or it was 102 and 100 that we dabbled on like Photoshop, just for like basic graphic design. But now with like Figma being like super versatile, I can see like those IA classes like just teaching Figma. I think like maybe they're teaching Figma. It's just been like I just graduated, so I probably might not know what the curriculum is like, but I can definitely see like prototyping software like Figma or even what is like Framer being taught in classes. And as well, I do know like there are elementary schools like across Canada and even like high schools that are like finally revamping their curriculum to include like coding and like software and like IT. So I definitely think that like when I took graphics class in high school, we dabbled in like Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, and now like maybe in like high schools, I can definitely see like Figma being introduced in even like at a really early stage in like elementary or high school.
Wow, that's a very interesting take on the educational viewpoint standpoint. I I went to like I was doing like a research for a startup. Like I started a couple years ago. We went to I don't know, I think it was a high school near Coquitlam or beyond Maple Ridge. So there was like a computer room. So they didn't have this. The story I heard was like they removed the computer room and installed iPads instead. So, so they're taking it another level. They're not teaching you how to use a computer. They're teaching you how to use an iPad. That's like another crazy thing.
Yeah, and I do remember like back then, like in high school, like this is almost like 10 years ago when they did introduce like those smart boards, but I feel like those might have not like caught on. But even then, like I see like new technologies. Like I even used like an iPad very briefly in high school. So I think like as time goes on, it's more people having to get like used to it and like caught up and like just like proper onboarding before like we can definitely see like a huge like shift. So I think it'll perhaps be like like this will be passed on to like the next generation where they'll fully be immersed in like using Figma or other like even like VR, AR types of software.
Yeah, totally. That's a very exciting future, honestly. And the fact that you pointed out also like I at 100, 102, I think I took those in 2019 and they were still teaching the same thing, unfortunately, back then. But yeah, I do see them teaching Figma. I feel like that's why comprehensive universities like Emily Carr, like I think Ryan can probably talk more about this, like and BCIT, they have programs, 2-year programs that focuses solely on UX UI versus like our bachelor's degree in CAT, which is also still very open-ended and general. That's why I'm also that's why I have this VXP thing going on out of SFU to try to validate that there is a need. The product designing, UX, UI design, it can be a whole uh, degree by itself. So trying to push for that. Yeah, yeah, education, obviously, and yeah, Ryan.
Yeah, like everybody has mentioned about how tech is moving super fast, that everything is developing. Like a new tech is coming up every like half a year or something. But at the same time, there are a lot of issues with it. Like we see a lot of like controversial about Facebook, like their algorithm, how they are bringing up negative or fake news. Their algorithm favor more negative news, all that stuff. So I feel like we as a people, our cognitive ability to figure out how to use the tech around us has now caught up on the speed of new tech being developed. So I think UX has or design has the power or responsibility to educate, teach people how better use their technology to favor their life, not just make them consumed by all the tech stuff. At the same time, like when I was in school, I heard about this idea of design being the magic thing or silver bullet to solve every problem in the product that make everything looks much better. But that was really the case. Like there are so many constraints in the real world that being a designer, you have to learn all aspects of pretty much everything in order to make sure you can push the things you think is better. So yeah, I wish like more designer can realize this and try to push this in their work to just remind people we need to be things like ethical, pay attention to user mental health, to yeah, the whole story like that.
Very, very cool, right? Honestly. Yeah, neurotech, seriously undiscovered yet, and definitely can see some really big changes coming with that. Very exciting. I can't really talk about it much since I barely know anything about it. But yes, yeah. So yeah, the future of UI and UX is very, very bright. Like I feel like they say how AI is gonna replace most jobs and like try to get into an industry that's more creative and robot cannot do for you. So I think like UX UI is definitely a field that will be unlikely to be replaced by AI. Hopefully we don't go jobless in the next 5-10 years. But yeah, let's move on to my final question here, and then we can answer some questions from the audience. Is everybody okay with that? So my final question here is advice you would have given to yourself, to your younger self, basically. Yeah, we'll go in order, starting from Grace.
Yeah, like I feel like I have a lot of advice. Like I feel like I was just a small potato just a year ago, and I have a lot of things to say to this small potato I was. I feel like the biggest struggle I kind of faced was imposter syndrome, kind of like comparing myself to people because I didn't come from a design background. I felt like I was like behind in life or like behind my career or whatever. And yeah, I just like felt a lot of pressure from that. And yeah, everyone's kind of going their own pace in life. Like, don't worry about it. And another advice is like, don't be afraid to take risks. Like, I feel like I took a risk by dropping my whole undergrad degree, and I'm not dropping it all. I still have it, but like dropping whatever I studied in my brain. Not in my brain. It's still my brain, but like kind of not pursuing any of that. But I had 4 years doing like none of that at all. But I feel like undergrad taught me what I don't want to do, which is just as important. But don't be afraid to like pivot if you're not enjoying it. If that thing doesn't spark joy, you can yeet it out. And so that's what I did. Don't be afraid to take risks. Like I feel like I took a lot of risk while transitioning away from pre-med, dropping everything from there, and then going into game design development, kind of dropping a lot of it from there, in order to go into UX and product design. So I feel like life is always a journey. No one has it all figured out. It's okay to change. It's okay to take risks. And the worst thing that could happen is you fail. or doesn't work out, but you always learn doesn't work out. So it's always a process of UXing your life, testing it out, user testing on yourself out, learning, collecting data, how you feel about it, both qualitative and quantitative data, and then iterating from there. So life is a UX process. And you also don't need permission to take risks. Like I have a lot of professors telling me like, oh, why you know engineer? Like you waste their degree, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, so what? And yeah, like just because people maybe like figures of authority in your life might have like some kind of fancy professor, PhD title, doesn't mean they're right. Doesn't mean they're right about you. So don't be afraid to do that. That includes your parents as well. And also just don't listen to people who tell you can't do something. They don't know you. You know yourself the best. And life is too short to live under someone else's dream. And don't just like you don't have to listen to people. Like even if they're your parents, like you don't have to listen to them. Because I feel like once you know what you're most successful at, once you know what you're most passionate about, you'll have more success in the long run as well. Because life is really too short to like do what you don't like to do. And also like making sure that you set boundaries and like make yourself a schedule, make sure you have time for yourself, because burnout is so real. Like it happens when you least expect it, and so balance is super essential for success. Make sure you schedule some time to just do whatever, do your hobbies. Never just like overcommit yourself, and don't be afraid to say no and setting boundaries, because the real people will understand. Some people will like not be really happy, but that is okay. There's so many people in this world, you don't have to please everyone. So I guess to sum it up, don't be afraid to take risks, don't listen to people who tell you can't do something, and always live a balanced life and set boundaries and say no if you need as well. And there's always going to be nice people, there's always going to be mean people, but you have a choice to focus on the nice people. I know that was a lot, but I had a lot to say to my small potato self a year ago.
A lot of great wisdom there, seriously. And I can really feel the emotion and like the experience you have behind each of these wisdoms. I can tell. And like I wish like somebody would, I mean, I've been told things very similar when I was younger, but then you also don't really understand it once you actually experience it. Yes, definitely. Yeah, like, guys, listen to Grace. You will definitely do great.
Thank you.
Move on to David.
Yeah, I was just thinking, yeah, I wish I had Grace's advice when I was young. That was really good. I feel like you guys probably all are working with kind of newer companies like startups where the organization kind of understands the value of user experience, but not everybody's that lucky. And I wasn't earlier in my career. And, you know, I work for a large organization. It's kind of slow moving now. So it's still a battle. So my advice for my younger self would be don't be afraid to push back sometimes, particularly with requirements that are kind of fed down to a UX project. We always have to advocate for the user. That's sort of the biggest part of our role. And in my organization, our direct clients are credit unions, not their customers. So we have to remember that it's their customers that are our end users. So there's that a bit of a disconnect. So we're always having to make sure we reinforce that we are advocating for them. And we need to understand them by doing end user research as much as we can. So yeah, that would be my biggest advice, is just as that advocate for the end user, don't be afraid to push back when you're hearing things that you know aren't going to work for those end users, or when you're hearing things that you know need to be validated with research.
Mm-hmm. Very, very good advice. I feel even when I started off working on my design and research, I didn't have that kind of guidance and mentorship. So I actually had to experiment and figure my way out and actually find that end user and actually push back all the other stuff my C level people are telling me.
Mm-hmm.
Really focus on, who are we actually solving the problem for?
Exactly. Yeah.
Really great. Yeah. Totally. Yeah, thanks for that. Move on to Nadia.
Yeah, so if I were to give advice, maybe so when I was just starting out in UX last year is like once I got my job, I got like huge imposter syndrome, because that was like after onboarding that I was kind of like really lost in like Figma and like the file that we're working on, and thinking about it now that like if I had to go back to maybe like even like last year, I have now learned that like everyone gets like imposter syndrome, like whether you're just starting out or if you're like maybe like you got promoted to like a new role or like so on. Like I eventually brought this up to like my manager, and he also felt like imposter syndrome because that was his first time ever like being a manager. So just know that like you're not alone in this, and that everyone is there to like help support you or if you need help. So just know that like don't be afraid to like ask for help when you need it, because chances are people might feel like the same thing, and it's like just reassuring to know that like they're not alone and they're like really like open to like offering support. And as well, I did had a coffee chat with someone yesterday. She worked at my co-op, but she was in engineering and now she works at like a fintech company in Toronto, and she's now like a senior engineering manager. And another piece of advice that I would give would be um, she's in a, like a manager position, and the reason why is because she wants to help others succeed, and she doesn't believe in like barriers at all, because you usually see in like tech that it's usually like men who are in like management roles, and she's also like a woman and also a person of color. And basically what I got out of that coffee chat yesterday was like to just like um when you have like goals to like no matter like how like if it's like over the top or whatever, then to always just like reach for those goals, because she didn't see herself in like initially in a management position, but she does like she really enjoys like helping people and like to really achieve like, what are they looking like, what value are they looking for the most. So she says like now that in like a management position, like she just says like just go for it, like even for really like now that UX is starting to become like an overly saturated industry where people might be just here that like most of the jobs out there are like senior product designer roles with like 5 years of experience. She says like don't focus on like that, don't focus on like who like if hundreds of people applied. The answer will always be no until you at least do it. So like if you haven't applied for that job, it will always be a no until like you hit that apply button. It will always be a no until like at least someone like reaches out to you. So that is some advice I would give to like just even like to myself like for the past year.
Yeah, don't be afraid of taking risks and chances and shoot your shot. As always.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting how like you touched upon like how you see like men usually in this managing positions and all. I feel like there, yes, it's always been the case, but in design right now we do see a lot of women in, yeah, like for example right now in my VXP Proton, the ratio to male to female is like female is like 7, male is like 3. It's amazing how we have this doorway for all women to like participate and influence, have a big influence in tech world, which is supposed to be a male dominant field. It's exciting to see, yeah, that
Mm-hmm.
progress further.
Yeah, and like so far throughout like my career, it's been like super short right now, but like during my internships, all my managers were women. And um I'm just trying to think like the more I've been working throughout my career, the more that initially I thought of like being like a senior individual contributor, but now like the more I keep talking to and like now working with people, the more that like management sounds like really important, because of not only just breaking that gap, but it's like the idea of leading by influence and like just setting an example for other people. Like it just really like makes like the industry and like just your whole world. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
Totally, yeah, very exciting. Right, last but not least, Ryan.
Yeah. I think the the most important advice I would give to younger myself is just try to do more networking. I was just super shy, like too afraid to talk to people when we meet in real life. So even though I know the importance of networking back in school, I just didn't do it. And I was just hoping like I could get a job by applying, but that was super hard to do. Um, and yeah, like back then I saw the only way to network is just to talk to people, but now since everyone's more people working remotely, and you can easily just set up call with them. And for me, that was much easier to talk with people to over Zoom or whatever. And also you have communities like design bodies and many other Slack communities. Like you can just chat with people, share your stuff, and getting feedback. Talk with designers. Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. Is I'm pretty active on some Slack communities. Um, yeah, it's much easier for me to just get to know people this way rather than just talking with people, and you can still learn a lot of by doing that. So it doesn't have to be like code reach out to designers and try to meet them. So yeah, I was just say do more networking, and one day it will lead you to a job position or something.
Totally. Yeah, it's very, very great, Ryan. I feel like, again, I also relate heavily to that. I feel like I was also an introvert that started off, and I got the opportunities I did because networking became a lot more easier. And for like, unfortunate that it had to happen due to COVID, but COVID did push the world into an online space, which made it easier for us introverts to gain more. So yeah, it's amazing how it changed. The world changed better for introverts.
Yeah, somehow. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yes, definitely network, guys. Like you don't know where can networking take you. I feel like, I don't know, in my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, in networking, getting a job through networking is definitely more preferred because you're not, when a hiring manager hires you, they don't just hire you for your skills, how good you are in the things that you do, but they hire you more for your character. Are they able to work with you better? How do you work in a team? How, like, that culture fit, they're what they're looking for more at the same time. That's what I believe. But yes, you
Yeah,
guys.
yeah. I actually agree with that. Like I was helping hiring a designer on my team around last year something. There was a designer that he has a pretty good portfolio. Like you can tell he has a experience, strong UX UI skills, but just by the way he talks about his work, like my manager was just immediately turned off because somehow you can tell he has a lot of ego about his work. Like it was super. It's hard for me to say to explain it very well now, but yeah. So I guess a point from that is just like you don't keep yourself check with your ego part. Yeah, like it sometimes it can really turn off people because of that.
Mm-hmm. No, totally, yeah. Like I think that was very well said. I feel everybody here understood that. Yeah, beware of egoistic designers. Design is always a group thing, and like a lot of feedback from everybody. Design is not just you, definitely. Okay, so that was the last question I had for our panelists. Now we can go into the Q&A. So if you guys have any questions for our panelists, yeah, quickly use the slide IO link that we have, because we're going to go through those questions right now. Okay, the first question we have is for Grace, actually. And the question is, how have you used all your experience in your design work or work in general?
Yeah, great question. Because I feel like I learned a lot, and I feel like everything I did in life, even if they're not like UX specific, applied to like kind of like my life or my job today. I guess the first experience was my obsession with video games when I was younger. Back when it was kind of shunned upon, my parents are like, "Don't play games and like rot your brain or whatever." But now I work on in the gaming industry, so like it helped me like get a job there, just because like I know a lot about player experience and how players in games feel. I could empathize with them, and I was able to like talk through my experiences in playing games when I was networking as well. So that also helped. Like early experience playing games and the obsession with anime and manga, being a weeb, a very proud weeb, uh, and just like loving the anime, loving the stories they tell, loving everything about it. And a lot of that's how I got into drawing from anime. And I feel like illustration helped me kind of just like drop down my ideas a lot. So games and anime helped me. So that's my first experience. And the second experience was like in engineering. No, actually, the first one is engineering, like bioengineering, computer engineering. It was a kind of series of problem solving. Like in engineers, our goal is to solve problems and build like technically feasible solutions. For that, so it helped me collaborate a lot with engineers at work. And kind of just like going off that, I write a lot. I was able to like kind of code or just like be able to like make efficient Figma designs, so they can be passed on properly as well. So like I feel like that helped, and I was able to kind of design for the technical limitations they had. I can't get into too much detail due to NDAs. And lastly, I feel like having that like entrepreneurial mindset. Like growing up, I also really love social media and blogging, doing sponsored posts and building design buddies, kind of with that entrepreneur mindset. It helped me collaborate a lot with PMs, thinking about the business side. How do you want to measure success? How do you want to validate things? What are the KPIs they're trying to reach? And just having these conversations so I can really understand like the goals of their product and for the company as well, and how I can better design to meet those KPIs. So like business goals and user needs as well. So I feel like all of my life experiences from like very different aspects of life. Like I feel like my interest in like games and anime and random weirdness helped me like relate to people as well. Like at work, a lot of people like anime and manga, and I was able to like have like hour-long conversations with them. And some of these people are like senior managers and like directors as well. And we just like connected on that way too, just because of a random obsession. So like if you're a weeb, like be a weeb, like we've had of it. You connect with other weebs that don't like with you. And yeah, and also like engineering and just like entrepreneurship and business side in general, like kind of helped me a lot in like my design work in general too.
Yeah, always experience. Always be open for new experience. That's probably it. So you'll be able to empathize better with all forms, even weaves.
Yeah, and don't change yourself to like fit into whatever mold. Like I stand proudly at work. I say my memes, I draw my anime, and I add my Slack emojis and I use them to react to like directors' posts. Just be yourself, and people will vibe with you.
Love that. Love the energy, honestly. Okay, our next question is for David. Okay, feel free to like all questions. Like they do say sometimes specified, but this could be open for everybody here too. So don't. So feel free to unmute your mic, even if the question is for somebody else. So what's it like managing a team, going from a designer to lead? Is there a different approach, or is it more of the same?
Yeah, I'm really glad they asked that question because I didn't get to touch on that, and it was a relatively recent change for me. It's only 7 months ago or so, and I have to say I was kind of hesitant to make that move. I think I had some preconceptions about what the role would be like, and I thought I just wanted to focus on UX and not with the administration side, and having, I guess, more back and forth with senior leadership. But it's been a really positive change for me. Partly just where I am in my career, you kind of gain some more experience and you have that to share. So just that supporting the team has been a really rewarding part of it for me. I have a great team, and any way I can help them just advance their careers, I try to do that. Yeah, that's was a real surprise to me actually, because I didn't expect to enjoy the side of it so much, and just also being able to advocate for the team in not just in projects but in kind of larger strategy meetings and things like that. which we want to see more of that. We want our department recently changed its name to include XP. So yeah, so the experience is right in the name of the department. So they've actually made this move to embrace it. So now we have to carry that banner, and so that's kind of exciting, and the team is excited by that. So it's good to be able to do that and to kind of broaden understanding of the value of UX across a fairly large organization. And the other side of it is, I guess, just kind of I like the design ops side of it too, and it kind of falls on me. So I transitioned us from Sketch to Figma, and that's been a super positive change. The team's just loving Figma. We're in the early stages of putting together a design system. We're in a bit of a unique position because, as I mentioned, our product goes out to all these credit unions, which then brand it for their own organization, right? So the design system is a little bit different from a standard one because it's not taking into account branding so much, more about brandability. So the planning that's going into that is really quite interesting. So those are things that kind of came with this transition to the team lead role. It's been good.
Wow, that's congrats on that. Yeah, that sounds amazing. That you find sorry. Fine. I'm running out of words. So excuse me.
You've been talking all day. I understand.
Yes. You find pleasure in helping others progress in their career. That's great. Yeah, that's very good. Helping everybody. It's like giving back almost to your younger self almost.
Yeah, a little bit. Mm-hmm. Plus, they're easy to manage. They're so good.
Anyone else have any comments on that?
Yeah, I want to add a little bit on that. I'm not a manager, but like working with my manager, I realized being a manager is more about providing mentorship around your whole work ability. Like being a senior designer, sometimes you will mentor junior designer on their craft skills, like UI, UX, or Figma, how to use Figma better. But my manager really helped me to be more efficient with my communication with teammates, be a better storytelling when I'm presenting my design. So yeah, so from my understanding, like being a design manager, you will do that sort of thing, make sure like your your designer on a team can do their job better, but not just being a better crafter. Is that a word? Yeah.
Wow, yeah. That's a good definition of a good manager. Right? I think you have a good manager in that perspective. For myself, I started at my startup. Sorry, I joined my startup as a volunteer as their first designer, and after a year after, suddenly I have two more junior designers coming in under me, with myself being a junior myself. So it did feel a little bit awkward being a manager or sort of product designer for them when I myself think that I don't have enough experience in the field. So all this talk and all this advice that David and Ryan you've given me is definitely, I feel, yes, that's how a good manager should be, and that's what I should be emphasizing on my side as well. So it's a little awkward for me, but yeah.
But yeah, it's about supporting your team, right?
Yes, it's all about supporting your team, definitely. Yes. All right. For our next question, I think this one's directed towards Ryan. It's asked, did you find having a traditional background in UX help you find your first job or connect with hiring managers?
I really want to say it helped, but I don't think it did. Yeah, like I mentioned, I I have this thought that I'm studying interaction design at Amnicar, which is pretty famous school in Canada, and I was not bad at it, and the whole UX industry is super popular, so there's no way like I should have pretty easy life after school, like getting a job or that. But that wasn't the case. Like I didn't know anyone in the industry. I had no connections, so I'm just applying jobs online. But I'm not getting a lot of interviews. Um, like and I did some co-op during school, but that wouldn't really help me. Uh, Also, so overall, I think your networking, uh, your network is much more important than your pure education background. Um, yeah, at least for me, that was the case. So like you don't really have to have fancy education in design school or anything.
Mm-hmm. It's more about your practice, I would assume.
Yeah, definitely.
Anybody else would like to say anything on that? Okay. Yeah. Traditional background, I'm not sure. I haven't put myself out there yet, so I also cannot say anything because I feel like I I could say that having a bachelor's in design may attract more people in a certain way, but definitely I feel like your craft, your portfolio does manage is the most important thing. Yes. Okay, move on to our next question. This one's for Nadia, but this I think it's a more general question for everybody here as well. So question is, hey Nadia, what do you value most in a design or design process?
Yeah, so I think for like design or design process in general is now that I've been in the industry for almost like 9 months, is when I first joined, I was expecting like my work to do like the traditional design process where it's like the double diamond process, but I immediately just like got like into like the Figma file, and then like my manager was like, okay, we have to like make these like mock-ups like right away. Anyway, so like with that story like being said, and basically what I'm trying to get is that with like the whole design process, like that was like my first like dive deep into like what I had to do for work. And now thinking about like the design process and just like design in general, more so is what I value is like the whole like culture, like when you join a company, joining like what is like the design culture you're gonna get into, because I feel like that also like just umbrellas the whole like process as like how does like this organization, how do they take like not only like how well could like they use Figma, but how well, or like what are their methods of using like research, or how do they work with like other developers. So now that I've gotten like a real taste into working for an organization solving like real problems, what I value most in I would just say like design in general is how does an organization treat its culture? Like do they use like sophisticated, like not sophisticated, but like do they use like industry standard tools? Do they use like research methods to like back up like their like findings or data, or like maybe like why does this mock-up like have less clicks than like this mock-up? How do they also like treat like their developers or like their marketing or customer success teams? So that is what I really value the most, is that even if they're just like, even for startups as well, because startups they might be still developing their design culture and they're just building it from scratch. It really just like tells a story, or just really tells you like the answer as to how seriously they take design. So that is what I value the most, is the whole like design culture, how like established, or like how are they trying to build it from scratch.
Design culture. That's a very, very interesting take. Anybody else have any comments on design culture or any specific value most in design process?
Well, I've mentioned research quite a few times, but for this question, I think I want to highlight just the value of collaboration. It just makes such a huge difference. I've been lucky on some projects to work with multiple designers, and just the what you can get out of just getting in front of a whiteboard and just hashing it out, brainstorming for hours or however long it takes. Um, what comes out of that is so much better than if you just sat down and tried to puzzle things out yourself. And if you don't have multiple designers, there's other people. There's experts on the project, subject matter experts. There's developers, other stakeholders. Get them all involved. The more people you have involved, the more people you have invested in the solution. So you can get sort of early stage buy-in to whatever you're going to propose, right? So collaboration is just so valuable.
Yes, 100%.
Uh,
Even as, sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, sorry. I want to echo on the collaboration part. So yeah, being a designer, like your job is definitely to do the design, do a good design. But at one point, I think would be useful to learn about how other people's working. I think Grace mentioned a little bit about by her experience building design bodies made her understand better how product manager works, how to take priorities, all that. For me, like I know a little bit about HTML and CSS, so it helped me to communicate with developers, understand their perspective. So just branching out outside of your design field, so it will be much easier for you to communicate with different teammates and understand their struggle mostly, so you can better like support them or just collaborate together better.
Yes, definitely. Design is never an individual work for sure. Definitely a collective effort. It goes a lot into it. Okay, so we last actual question on the list. This is not directed to anybody, but would you guys prefer in person, remote, or hybrid work life? It's open to all.
I guess like going on the design process, I really think like especially for me when I was starting out in design, I didn't think too much of the business side, but just something that I got a lot during interviews for internships was that hiring managers asked them like, how do you measure success? So having balancing both user needs and business goals to make sure you have ways to like validate the product is super important in the process. And like when I was beginning, I was like, oh, I just gotta like make the experience better. But you need to be able to tie to a business outcome because at work, how you get promoted is the more impact you do and more business impact because it's a business trying to make money. And once they show more of that, but being able to advocate for the users as a designer is also a super important part of the design process for like the full cycle as well. And then for the I prefer remote work. I actually never, well, I only worked in office like when I was an intern because I was still in school like, for COVID. But I like remote work because I can work on design plays at the same time and I know how to spend like 2 hours or an hour more commuting and it adds up and time is money and yeah, and time is like the only resource you never get back. And yeah, so I like remote work because more time and but remote plus like fun team offsites where I can like meet my team in person but not be expected to like go in office.
Very cool. Yeah, I forgot. It's a collaborative effort if you work remote individually. So to find a group of designers, you can like get industry professionals you can communicate and network with. So to do that, networking is important. So like joining groups like Design Buddies, Vancouver Design Check-in, or the Collective Studio is great for those collective work as well. So for those who are listening, please join those groups. And like I feel like you guys really appreciate it. I mean, really get a lot of information coming out of it. But yeah, coming back. So Anybody else want to comment on the remote one-to-one person in person?
Sure, I agree with Grace. Not having to take an hour and a half out of my day commuting, sitting behind the wheel of a car is just amazing. I think there's a danger that you lose a little bit of the face-to-face, particularly I just talked about collaborating. But fortunately, we have tools that are kind of catching up, and I don't think too much is lost doing it remotely. And maybe we'll get to the point where it's actually better. The tools might, do more than a dumb whiteboard at work or even a smart one.
Yeah, I definitely share the same opinion. I feel like it has already caught up to being better than in person sometimes.
Yeah, one quick comment
Yeah.
about the UX of the whiteboard is that only if you're physically, like only like a few people could write at the same time, but in remote, everyone can do it. So everyone has an equal say and opinion. So that counts it all.
I think there's some spontaneous interactions that happen in the workplace that we're losing. It's hard to make up for that with Zoom or Teams or whatever. But overall, it hasn't been too bad. And I'm very lucky that my organization, we were well suited to working from home. Not everybody was so lucky. There were definitely people at our organization who had to be in the office. They're keeping servers going and things like that. But we had to clear out to make sure they were safe. So it went from probably 550 people in the office to about 25. But now there's a few more people going in, and some people are encouraging me to do that a bit more often. Sounds like it's more about drinking at lunchtime, but anyway, that would be fun. So I should start to go in once in a while, but there isn't any pressure. I'm lucky to go in all the time.
I definitely prefer remote work. It just I can take control of my. Oh, sorry.
Maybe if like the internet was a bit behind, but maybe if you wanted to go first, Ryan, or I could also speak.
Yeah, you can go first.
Okay. I guess maybe I'll give a different answer. So now that I've experienced working from home for like almost like a year now that I've also moved to like a new city, I prefer like a hybrid work. Maybe this answer might change in like a year or two, but maybe like right now I would prefer like working like a hybrid work because my company we're going to be remote indefinitely, and the cons of that is that we can only do like those meetups that I mentioned like earlier in our talk, that when me and my coworker, when we did that road trip to Ottawa, we could probably only do that like once or twice a year. So now I would definitely like to see like some coworkers like in person, like especially like my manager and like whoever else on like our design team, because learning stuff like Figma, like prototyping, or even like collaboration, like just whiteboarding or doing like user interviews, I feel like that is definitely harder to do online because it's hard to interpret people's like body language or like stuff like just whiteboarding as well. It's like slightly harder to do online just because of like just drawing stuff like through like not everyone has like the same technologies they have at home, and people's circumstances are like even different like at home as well. Like having like coworkers who have like families, they have like kids like just running around, or like if they live in a neighborhood where there's like construction like just going on, that's stuff like they can't control. So I definitely prefer that hybrid work approach. And again, that might change in like a year, like my answer might change, but that is definitely something I prefer as well. I do agree with the commute as well, because how like still living in Vancouver at the time, like commuting from from my place to like the Surrey campus or even like the Burnaby campus, that takes like quite a bit, like that takes like a number as well. And now that I've moved to Toronto as well, Toronto was like so much more bigger than Vancouver. And when I did my co-op at the time, I had coworkers who commuted from like if anyone from Toronto is like watching this, by the way, like just taking the GO train from like Burlington or like Oakville to like downtown, like that takes a whole toll. And like even the highways as well, it like just traffic, it really takes a toll on your mental health. So that's my whole stance on working hybrid.
Yeah, really interesting to see that perspective, honestly, Nadia. Plus, in a new city, like in a new place, knowing nobody or knowing very few people, you love to socialize and make more friends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we can, Ryan, you had something?
Yeah. So I prefer remote, but there are many things you need to learn about remote working. For example, like oftentimes you need to over communicate working remotely, because you can't just go other people's desk and asking for feedback or something. So when chatting on Slack or Teams, you just need to make sure you communicate with your idea or attention well, like giving context, all that stuff. So and you need to be active on there. So yeah, so like so the collaboration can working smoothly. And you also have to learn how to balance your work and life, because it's really easy to just sit at a computer working whole day. That was kind of my problem when I first started working remotely. So you really need to learn how to balance that set boundary. Um, so you don't like overwhelm yourself.
Yes, burnout is real. That is,
Yeah,
we all,
those are really good points. And, back to what Nadia was saying, for people who are starting new jobs, or like even worse, like starting a new job in a new city when you're working remotely, that's a huge challenge. We've hired somebody and we're onboarding her, and it's not the same. She's not in the office just meeting everybody on other teams and getting to know the whole workplace. So those are definite challenges.
Mm-hmm. I also should have mentioned as well, because my work is based out of the Eastern time zone during the winter time, since I was still in Vancouver, just like waking up at I didn't have to do this every single day, thankfully, but there were some days I had to wake up at like 6 a.m. and that would be 9 a.m. Eastern time. So that was also like one of the reasons why I had to move east, was because like that time zone difference, like I just like I couldn't like just deal with that anymore. But there is a pro of that, is that I end earlier at like 2 or 3 p.m. But like just long term, that was not sustainable for me.
need your sleep. Definitely. Right. And I think that's all the questions we had actually. Like, hopefully, I really enjoyed this conversation with you guys. I feel like talking with designers is always very fun, and especially with various experiences coming from different backgrounds like yourselves. Hopefully, it was the same for you guys. But yeah, otherwise, we're gonna wrap it up pretty much now. Yeah, thank you everybody for coming. Thanks Grace, Nadia, David, and Ryan for having coming over and having this panel discussion with us. Hopefully our audience got some really good insight about a lot of things actually. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Eric, for putting this together. This was great.
Yeah,
Great
thank you,
meeting
Eric.
everybody on
Yeah,
the
thank you. Thanks
Yeah,
for having
thank
us
you.
on. It was really wholesome.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You guys, you guys make this possible for me. Yeah. Yeah. So feel free, guys, to connect with everybody here on LinkedIn.
Definitely.
Feel free to join Design Buddies and other design groups that I haven't mentioned. And yeah, that's all the panels and workshops I have for today. So we have design sprints hosted by Zoe and Nick over here. So look out for those. Otherwise, see you all tomorrow, and looking forward to your amazing prototypes.